Hey everybody, this is TJR. Paul McCartney has released a new song for 2019. It's entitled Get Enough, and on this single, Paul McCartney fully embraces autotune. In a recent interview, McCartney predicted the reaction he would get from musical purists, stating, and I quote, "Oh no, Paul McCartney's on, expletive, autotune. What have things come to?" Now, this song was co-written with contemporary hitmaker Ryan Tedder, whom McCartney also co-wrote For You with, which was the first single from his last album entitled Egypt Station. By the way, For You is the only song on Egypt Station that I didn't like. So what do I think of Get Enough? Well, I'll start by saying that what I like best about the song is its instrumental bridge, which uncharacteristically arrives near the song's closing. Now, I should go on record at this point to state that I despise the sound of autotune in today's popular music. With that said, I do see some practical uses for it. I can see its use as an audio effect, perhaps to emphasize a certain theme within a song. Perhaps if my song is about mechanization, or about robots, or about dealing with icy cold inhumanity. But it's not something I want to hear song after song, and certainly not in the extreme way that it is used in most of today's pop music, and how it was used in this new single by Paul McCartney. This kind of obvious, extreme use of autotune sounds cold and inhuman to my ears. So no matter how good your love song about your girlfriend is, if your entire vocal is autotuned, you are going to leave me cold. I can also see where autotune can be used conservatively to fix a recording. As a musician, I do stuff like this all the time when I'm recording. Perhaps I flub one note on an otherwise good take. MIDI allows me to take that note and move it to the correct pitch that I want to hear it at. This is an efficient, time-saving tool and is no different than the use of the punch-in and punch-out technique that recording engineers used to use to fix recordings during the pre-digital age and still use to this day. So I have no problem using autotune in this context. More on that in a moment. So the use of autotune aside, what do I think of Paul McCartney's new single, Get Enough? Well, in spite of my disdain for autotune, I did listen to the track several times, and I came to the conclusion that unlike McCartney's last collaboration with Ryan Tedder, it might actually be a pretty good song. But the extreme use of autotune is like asking me to listen to a good song with the sound of fingernails scratching against a chalkboard. I kept thinking to myself, there might actually be a pretty good song in here if I could just hear it. When the auto-tune vocals do stop and we get to that instrumental section, suddenly the whole song comes to life, and I guess that's why I like the bridge the best. I also kept asking myself, why? Why use auto-tune? I know his voice is showing its age, and I mentioned that in my review of Egypt Station, but I still love the album, For You aside, of course. Two things occur to me. I want to pause now and state that I hate it when YouTube commentators, like me, try to guess the intentions of someone they don't really know. So take what I say next with a certain grain of salt. Number one, I really do believe that Paul McCartney wants a radio hit. Not just some radio airplay, but a bona fide radio hit, a top 10 single in the present day. I think he wants that feather in his cap. He doesn't need to prove himself to anyone. I know this. I think the rest of the world knows this. But the human condition being what it is, I'm sure he probably can't help but feel the desire to score just one more big charting hit. I also found myself thinking about Brian Wilson's last album entitled Peer Pressure, where he did use autotune in the conservative way that I mentioned earlier, just using it to fix and or smooth out the rougher spots. I noticed this use of autotune in my review of Peer Pressure, and my comment at the time was, he's gotten older. He knows his voice isn't what it used to be, but he still wants to create and record new music. So he's using autotune to smooth out the rougher spots. I gave him a pass because he's already proven himself. He's already proven that he can sing this stuff. It's not like a lot of today's younger contemporary artists where all we've heard from them is autotune vocals. I think Paul McCartney might be coming to the same realization. He knows that his voice isn't what he used to be. And while he managed to pull off Egypt Station without needing it, he's probably going to start needing it soon and he's probably going to use it in the same way that Brian Wilson had to. So, what does he do? He uses it on a single first, and he uses it to the extreme. Let the complainers, like me, complain about it. Then when he starts to use it just to smooth out the rough spots, no one's really going to complain about it. We'll all say, well, at least he's not going crazy with it like he did on Get Enough. From this perspective, using auto-tune like he has in this way is the smartest move he could make. Now, in that same interview, McCartney also stated, you know what? If we'd had this in the Beatles, we'd have been, John particularly, would be so all over it. All his freaking records would be. I believe what McCartney is referring to here is the fact that John Lennon liked to double track his vocals, meaning he would record his vocals once, then he would double it a second time, singing it as closely to the original performance as possible, because he liked the effect that it gave on his vocals. The doubling of lead vocals is a common technique used by producers and recording engineers to create a bigger lead vocal sound, and I have, depending on the track, used this technique myself to create a certain sound or effect. But when I have used it, and when John Lennon has used it, and when countless other artists have used it, it's still a natural human voice that you are hearing. I, of course, never knew John Lennon, but taking into account everything I have ever read about him, I have a hard time believing that, outside of using it as an effect, he would have appreciated the cold, sterile sound of autotune over the more emotional sound of the human voice. Now, as for the Beatles, it's true that they were always experimenting in the studio, and if autotune had been available as a new technology during the 60s, they more than likely would have played with it in some way or another. But I stress, if it was new. The Beatles were known for pushing the boundaries of what you could do with the technology that was available to them in the studio, not for using it in the same tired way that everyone else had already used it for. And it's for that reason I'm not completely sure I buy that statement about John Lennon. So have you heard this track? What do you think? Do you like the song? Do you dislike it? How do you feel about my thoughts on autotune? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Let me know in the comments. I'm looking forward to reading what you have to say. As always, if you like what I'm doing here, please be sure to click like, please be sure to click subscribe, and click that notifications button so you can know when I release new videos. And of course, if you really want to help me make more videos, please consider becoming a patron supporter. Pledging as little as just the cost of 1 cup of coffee a month can make a huge difference. Thanks everyone for watching. Bye-bye.